I'm meeting with the ambassador of Paraguay in Israel, Alejandro Rubin, who has been involved in the relations between Israel and Paraguay for many years. And I must say that Paraguay is a very exceptional case because people often talk a lot about the support of countries like Argentina for Israel, or they also talk a lot about the negative side of other countries that are against Israel. But the case of Paraguay is one that I don't want to go unnoticed because it's a case that sheds a lot of light on the continent. But there is a lot of hostility from many countries, many governments, but I think there is more light than darkness. And one of the examples is the case of Paraguay. And that's why I would like to talk to the ambassador since I received his kind invitation. I would like to start from that point. How is it possible? Or how would you explain the case of Paraguay? Because we see on the geopolitical map countries that go against the current, and there is one that stands right in the middle of the current. They're on the right side. History. Explain this.
How about Yakov? Welcome to the embassy here in Jerusalem. As you can see in the background, for us, it's a historic embassy. We moved it in the middle of the war, and that's not unrelated to the relationship you're talking about. Our Paraguay-Israel relationship goes back to the beginning, to the partition vote, and from there it hasn't stopped. It's a mutual relationship. Obviously, Paraguayans know much more about Israel. We have to do some work because Israelis might not know as much about Paraguay. But well, they have their own internal issues that make them focus on survival. Let's see, Paraguay is indeed an independent case, almost independent, but Paraguay as well. Historically, it's an island within Latin America, an island surrounded by land. We don't have direct access to the sea, but we do have. In history, we can see that Paraguay has always been a bit different from the rest of the continent. We have a history that I think unites us in our DNA, a great war, the War of the Triple Alliance in 1860, which lasted 5 years. It was a war of Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay against Paraguay, where 95% of the male population disappeared. That was a real genocide, and I think it's one of the things that unites us in our DNA with the Jewish people because of the Shoah. Afterwards, Paraguay is 95% Christian Catholic. So do we have a book in common that unites us? And we also have leaders like today's President of the Republic, a young leader who has his convictions, but he also says something. He says that the support for Israel, he felt it even during his campaign, that people told him we have to stand with Israel. And as the president said when we inaugurated this embassy here in the Knesset, he spoke in the Knesset, and he said, even if Paraguay is alone in the world among nations supporting Israel, it will stand by Israel, because it's the right side of history.
Yes, in fact, now that I entered the embassy, the mezuzah, that is, we Jews put a parchment with Hebrew texts on the wall, on the door. This is written in the Torah, in Numbers 15. And the ambassador explained to me that it was made with fragments of missiles fired at Israel. And there you can see an example like this message that from the destruction, there are people who try to destroy the Jews. 95 of the men exterminated in a war. I don't know if you know population figures like that. It's totally a genocide, but from those ashes to be reborn. I think that's a very, very interesting point for the audience as well. I don't know if you noticed the flags, but when I arrived, what caught my attention was that the flags aren't made of plain fabric, but they're woven. Do you have a comment about this?
This is called nyanduti. Usually nyanduti is used to make tablecloths and they're handmade. For me, it's an art form. That's why I even have it hanging here like paintings. Our beautiful flag is made of nyanduti, and it has a whole story behind it. They make it by imitating the web of spider webs. So it's something of ours, very much ours, and we like it a lot. Let me share something about Yakov and the war, not just the genocide. What I see as important is that today we are brothers with Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay. More than brothers, we have Mercosur. We are part of a nation. So that also gives me a lot of hope for what might happen here in the future.
Yes, I would like to ask you about this topic then. Yes, I love the idea that there was a war, but nowadays there is synergy, let's say harmony between both countries. like all those who were once at war. Israel argues that the Middle East is challenging today, with Israel surrounded by both hostile and non hostile countries. And there's the impression that it's Jews against Arabs, Israel and the Arabs. If that perception is correct, how would you explain that Paraguay, for example, and I don't want this to be a very difficult question, but maybe a bit undiplomatic. How is it that Paraguay maintains good relations with both Israel and the Arab countries? Is there perhaps a contradiction in this?
Why would there be a contradiction in the end? Well, it also comes down to the leadership of our president, being able to lead and have convictions. And I think this isn't a war of Israel against the Arab world. In fact, sometimes I ride buses or trains and I see that Israel itself is an example of this. Nearly 2 million Arabs live here and coexist, and there is a perfect. It's not just coexistence, they're part of society, the Knesset and me. I go to hospitals or universities and you can see that coexistence here. People outside sometimes don't understand because they see that war, but being here you can see that coexistence. It's a matter of exporting it and seeing it. In fact, with the Abraham Accords, the new boom was also incredible. I think that in the end, they're all part of the same story. And when this happens, for example, the Abraham Accords, Israelis started traveling to all these countries, and everything you see is very productive. I think there is that need. It's a matter of being optimistic. I'm very optimistic in that sense.
That Israel will reach days of stability with our countries that today seem hostile. I
really believe so. Optimism is key. It's not easy. Obviously, it's not easy. There's work to be done. The leaders have to do their part. The leaders have to understand what's happening because sometimes you think you're doing the right thing, but you end up doing it wrong. You have to understand the Middle East. It's not easy to understand the Middle East. You even have to understand Islam or Judaism. And by understanding all of that, you can say, yes, it's possible.
Yes, that last thing you said caught my attention because it connects with what you mentioned about a large part of Paraguay's population being Christian. And it's precisely this language, I don't want to say religious, but more metaphysical. It's a language that really connects to the situation in Israel. I'm glad you're optimistic too, something that might seem funny to the audience. You say that maybe Israelis aren't very aware of what's happening in Paraguay because we're busy with the war. But as I understand it, will you correct me? A good portion of the meat exports that arrive in Israel come from Paraguay, meaning we consume Paraguayan meat.
Look, Paraguay is among the fourth, fifth, or sixth largest meat exporters in the world. And Israel is one of the main countries that are customers of Paraguay. I arrived here at the beginning of 2024. In 2023, we sold about $80 million. In 2024, we've already sold almost 150 million. And now in July, we're already at 130 million and we're only halfway through the year. But Israelis still don't know Paraguayan beef. They still don't know, they don't realize they're consuming Paraguayan beef. So that's one of my main goals that I'm pursuing right now. Recently, a supermarket chain already put up the Paraguayan flag to show that they're selling Paraguayan beef. And that's the job I have to do. That's what I realize. I'm very realistic. When I came here, or before I came here, I used to come to Israel a lot. I used to say it was Paraguay, and regular people would say Paraguay, Uruguay, the usual confusion, right? A common experience for Paraguayans abroad. They didn't know us, but when I arrived in January 2024, something started to change. The Israeli started asking me, he didn't know much, he started asking me about Paraguay's position with Israel. And I, with a bit of the chutzpah I have and the relationship I know very well, told him, Google it, you'll see Paraguay is one of the countries supporting Israel, but since that January, when did we change the embassy afterwards? Today I say I'm from Paraguay and the Israeli tells me thank you, and that's a very important change. And that also makes people now ask about Paraguayan beef or start to see what Paraguay is. And I also really believe in Mercosur. I believe that Paraguay is the best place for the Israeli to do business. Let's say he lands there to make investments and do business, and that's what we're working on, and we're getting a lot of response.
I would love a scenario like that because, as I said in the video, Paraguay, and you mentioned it, is about the United Nations vote, a critical moment. If Israel is going to be welcomed by the family of nations, Paraguay casts a very critical vote in this group of countries that were in favor, and that story is very long. There are other areas, just to start wrapping up, and also looking to the future as an ambassador, since you're representing a country, where are we headed?
Well, look, regarding the vote, let's not just focus on the vote in 48, because even now Paraguay continues to vote. And that's a historical matter that Paraguay provides support in Israel's international relations. But that's a political matter. I think my intention is to unite beyond just the political aspect, also to work on economic matters and in the area of societies. I think we have a lot in common, and that's what we're working on. Working from here, from Jerusalem, from the eternal capital of Israel, to unite.
Sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if this was mentioned strongly, but the fact that Paraguay has an embassy in Jerusalem, and in fact the embassy was moved in December 2024, that's like putting your foot down. I mean, a continent where there are many presidents who are very hostile. Paraguay makes a move, stands up, and takes a very, very firm action. That is, having and being at the embassy in Jerusalem. For me, it's something truly historic. Sorry for the interruption, but it was important for me to point that out.
It's not historic. The Israeli acknowledges it. That also makes my job much easier during the opening. It's not the same today. It's not the same as I told you today. The Israeli says thank you to me. He says thank you to me. As a representative of an entire country, when we tell or show what we're doing, it makes things easier. Today, Israelis see Paraguay as a close friend of Israel, founded on shared values. As I told you, we recognize Taiwan, and obviously recognizing Taiwan also means having some distance from China, right? But in the end, it's a matter for us. As the President of the Republic said, it's a matter of values. Supporting Israel is a matter of values. Supporting Taiwan is a matter of values. And in that, the leadership of our president is very clear, and I think that is also respected. In the long run, we believe, we are convinced that we are on the right side. History
100%. And well, thank you for your time, Mr. Ambassador. As I said, sometimes we focus a lot on talking about darkness and war and the countries that are against us. On my page, I share all my criticisms openly, but little is mentioned about the positives. And I think that those who are part of this page, seeing what countries like Paraguay have achieved, you can also take part in that. In my opinion, you could also influence your governments to take the right side of history, to make sure they are on the right side of what will be the future of humanity. That's all for now. Thank you, Ambassador, for your time.
One little thing. Yes, there is no darkness and light. Darkness doesn't exist. What there is the absence of light, and sometimes with just a little bit of light. A single candle can make a difference in a dark room. Paraguay could be that candle.
100 thanks.